Module 2. Implementation and Evaluation of the Strategy. This module explores the development of action plans that align with the objectives of the motorcycle safety strategy. Mr. Beer will start Module 2.
But I want to get started on my next module, which is about taking the strategy that you've developed, using the stakeholders that you have identified there, how do you implement that strategy, and how do you then evaluate that strategy? This is it's a complicated diagram, but a simple way of thinking. We have our strategy and we have these broad areas to look at and to focus on. You can take one of those, you can collect more information, review conditions, and then you develop a program associated with it. I will run you through a specific example of this. So this is just the theory, the concept, and I'll give you an actual example soon of whatever the program is that you want to do. In this case, we've put in here infrastructure improvements, police. So this, and this is an example of how you would do it for an infrastructure program. So that's where we're looking at individual spots on the road network with high levels of motorcycle crashes and what you could do about that. So we're talking about promoting the use of safer vehicles and safety equipment, but also looking at that individual spot and looking at what can be done there from an infrastructure perspective, and also involving the police. And then you go to finding out what works. I think this will be clearer when I give you a more concrete example, and so we'll keep moving on. One thing that's been successful around the world in different jurisdictions is linking local activities with statewide or national programs. Instead of different things happening and different promotions happening around the country, if you can all have the one message at the same time, it generates its own swell. An example of this is coordinated campaigns, something that is used commonly around the world, and you'll see in some jurisdictions they will have big publicity campaigns that say police are now targeting helmet use, and they have a week or a month that is dedicated to everybody focusing on helmet use. So if you're in the north of your country, the police are focusing on helmet use. If you're in the south of the country, police are focusing on helmet use. The advertising is all on helmet use. And what happens with that is you get the power of numbers. More people talking about it, more people become aware of it. And then as Ray explained to you earlier in the week, your enforcement can be targeted at that specific issue. So it's a good way to enact some of the elements of your strategy. Try to mobilize resources. You need all the help you can get. You've identified stakeholders, people that have a stake in that, in the safety of motorcyclists in your country. Use them. Get them to help. There might be other local organisations, rider groups. That may be different for different countries, but sometimes rider groups can be helpful. Reference groups. A very important one is the local media. Often we don't utilise them as well as we could. They're very powerful in getting our message out there. The community, and then advocates. And the term advocates are people that will take your message and really promote that. They can be very influential people, they can be celebrities, they can be members of the public, community leaders, but somebody who takes that message on, and that's even another way for it to get into the higher level political environment, is if somebody independent from the department that you work for can be advocating, can be lobbying, can be pushing for this. So we want to see results out of whatever we do, and we want this to be a coordinated activity. You want to use the media when you can. We want to motivate people and organisations, and that's a very hard thing to do because everybody has lots of different priorities, lots of things they need to do. But some ways to motivate are to use goals. So if we set a target, then people can aim at that, and you can use reward. You can also use competition, but you need to be sometimes careful with how you use competition in the road safety space. It can be very interesting. There's also you need to think about urgency versus sustainable action. Sometimes we can get a swell happening, very urgent that we need to do something if there is a catastrophe that happens. Very quick, the government wants to see some action very quickly. But to make change happen, we need to have a sustainable change. So your instantaneous action needs to have long-lasting effects. When we have a strategy or action plans and we want to get the information out there, we have to have a think about what method we do that. We can use print media, and you've seen that the strategy here, we have a printed strategy. You can broadcast it. You can use interactive media. Obviously the internet these days is a very good tool to get information out there. But there are advantages and disadvantages with each. Broadcasting can be very expensive. Interactive media may only be seen by a certain group of people. So others may not actually have access to the internet. And they may be groups that you need to help from a road safety perspective. I briefly mentioned working with the media. In most jurisdictions, the media can be used very effectively to get a message out there, and at low cost. If you can make a story about what you're doing, the media are very interested in those issues, and there are great examples around the world of different media outlets partnering with road safety groups so that they can get their message out there. They create stories about them. And when you're thinking about these stories, you need to put your media hat on. You need to think like a journalist and think about your stories. They need to be exciting. They need to be newsworthy. They need to have a buzz about them, excitement about them. The launch of a strategy often is not exciting enough for the media to turn up. You need to have more traction. So you need to think about a good story. We were talking about using the media, pitching your story. When people are killed or injured, we heard that it can be the catalyst for change to happen. Now, having messages ready to go that are well thought out, well researched and clear, and having appropriate spokespeople is a very good tool. We've had celebrities that have been injured and killed in car crashes or in motorcycle crashes. The media wants to talk about that. And if you can be there to talk about a strategy that you have, an action or a campaign, you acknowledge the tragedy of this and say, and this is why it is so important that we implement this strategy, the campaign. That's just one way you could possibly do it. With your action plan, Eric or Ray talked to you about the SMART principles, the specific, measurable, action orientated. Very similar lines here. We need to be specific about what we're going to do. We need measurable milestones. These should be attainable, things that you can do, and realistic. We all want to fix the problem as quickly as possible, but we need to think about how we can logically do that. Assigning responsibilities is a good thing. An action without somebody responsible for that action doesn't get done. Reporting mechanisms. Who will you be reporting to? Who will be checking that actions are being followed up? Mechanisms for review and monitoring. So that's looking at what worked and what didn't. And as I said before, timelines are very important. We can improve the design of a program and the implementation of a program by critically analysing it and seeing what worked and what didn't work. In my jurisdiction, I like to use independent people to evaluate. I think that's important because if you evaluate it internally, the people that are responsible for delivering it evaluate it, it's their nature to promote more beneficial things than may have actually occurred. I often use the universities, the institutions like the universities. They're independent and they look at it from a very academic sense and they provide you an evaluation report. And this is also used to justify further funding or further initiatives. If you can say, we had a campaign, we implemented that campaign, it saved 500 lives, it cost this much, then if you can take that information and put that up the line, you're more likely to see more funding because it's working and you've got proof that it's working. This is just a diagram to show the cycle. I will quickly run through it. You have an action, the development of a program, and this can be a publicity program, an infrastructure program, an enforcement program, any program. You identify the issues, you analyse those, you work out where you're going to get the money to do it, you implement it, then you evaluate it, and it keeps circling around, and you need to keep changing it and keep improving it. I won't spend too long on this. Again, we're talking theory, we're talking concepts. I want to get to some practical measures. In Victoria, we were lucky enough that we had a hypothecated fund for motorcycle safety, dedicated to motorcycle safety. That money could only be used for initiatives to improve motorcycle safety. And that gave us a lot of ability to implement the strategy. And one of the big things we spent money on was an infrastructure program, a motorcycle blackspot program. As an engineer, I am always very attracted to these sorts of programs because as an engineer, you're trained to solve problems. And what we do with a blackspot program is we go out and we identify problem areas where the crashes are occurring. And then we go there and we look at what can you do? How can you fix that from an infrastructure perspective? The important things that we found worked really well, and these can be applicable for not only infrastructure programs, but any program that you want to run. We found that regional empowerment was a very powerful tool, where you say to the regions, this is what we want to do, you are responsible for it. They take ownership of that. There are specific issues in specific regions that they will be able to deal with, and they will understand better than anybody else can. When you provide a set of guidelines, though, which are overarching. So these regional areas or country areas or different areas can use those guidelines. For ours, we had the competition element, which was each region found black spots. So the term black spot meaning an area where there is a high number of crashes, found those areas, and they prepared project bids. So they said, here is a problem area, this is what we're going to do about it. This is how much it's going to cost. And this is how it's going to be implemented. They came in with a timeline. And we got all these projects in, and we looked through them, and we evaluated them. We decided which was the best use of the money. As I said, they all had timelines, and we monitored them, and we checked on their performance of delivery. They reported in, and then we evaluated the whole program. And we looked at which of those projects did we fund that really worked well, that saved a lot of motorcyclists' lives, saved a lot of serious injuries, and which ones didn't work. They didn't all work. But then what we did was we went back to our guidelines. We changed those guidelines. We took out the ones that didn't work. We kept the ones that worked, and we gave more emphasis to those. And we did another round of projects. And each year we were doing 20, 30 projects. This is just a diagram we use to show in my state all the places we've done projects. We've spent about $50 million million US on infrastructure improvements for motorcycle safety. Just each of those dots is a different project. The exercise for this activity, and as I mentioned, we're just going to spend a small amount of time on this just to start you thinking. You can identify just one motorcycle safety issue you know about. We've heard lots already today. It could be helmet use. It could be speed. It could be drink riding, intoxicated riding. Just pick one of those and start to think about your action plan using the template provided